Welcome, everyone. My name is Suzanne Pichetti Johnson. I'm with Avenues to Wellness, and we are a program of the Frank R. Howard Foundation. I am very proud to introduce our guest speaker today, Wolfgang Ronnefeldt. He has been a counselor for over 30 years, and he practices a body-based, experiential form of counseling called Hakomi, which he will demonstrate today. He is known as a specialist in anger management and has led court-ordered men's groups for Mendocino County's court system for many years. The title of his presentation today is Navigating the Wild River of Anger. Thank you very much, Wolfgang, for being here today. And I would also like to thank and welcome Arlie Clivis and John Kelleher for being part of this. All right, take it away.
Right. Well, thank you very much for the introduction and for everybody who's here, and also for the generosity of the Howard Foundation and Suzanne to organize this, and there were obstacles to get this all together, including a demolition crew outside last time when it was scheduled. But here we are. Also, I would like to say that the topic is really a big one, a large one. And it's actually, anger is an aspect of our human emotion. All humans have that emotion. And some of it is really very dangerous, but it's also an aspect of our life force, really. And so it can be like, an unruly horse that cannot be tamed. It can be anger that suddenly moves within a second from 0 to 120 to a murderous rage. Or it can be really also something that can be tamed and worked with. And so it is really a very huge subject, and depending where everybody is in their lives, there can be periods when we are just angry about something, about the way we're raised, or the way we're hurt, or, a divorce that was not okay, we can be angry for years. That is detrimental, actually. So anger needs to be dealt with a certain amount of awareness. So I'd like to put anger more into a larger spectrum of the emotional range. There are the so-called constrictive emotions. Constrictive emotions are hate, which is very intense, fear, which we all know in terms of anxiety, and people call it I'm uncomfortable, which is this modern word, but it's really basically an aspect of fear. Guilt, which is also really quite destructive. So, we all carry a certain amount of guilt for things we have done, or maybe in our childhood it was instilled into us through religious programming or whatever it is. But it's also really can be very constrictive in terms of guilt and shame. Now, guilt is more about a certain action we are doing, and shame has more of something is wrong with me, a kind of more global aspect of my identity is shameful in that sense. So that's very destructive. And, somebody with a cancerous situation, there's also with a multitude of aspects, whether it's lifestyle or diet or whatever it might be, but there probably is something in the guilt and shame there too. those are some of the constrictive emotions. And constrictive emotions are really, they constrict our viewpoint, our consciousness. So it's like, we have aspects of our view that are limited, are too over-focused, and we don't have the larger range of our entire consciousness. It also has effects on our immune system. So the more constricting the emotion is, the stronger is the repression on our immune system. So if there is a part of us that are, for a long period of time is angry or in a fearful place, that definitely has something, an effect on our immune system. That is important to remember. So it's not just, after all, we are integrated humans. So we are not separated from our emotions and our body and our spirit and our mind. No, we are all one. And they interact in different ways. So these are the constrictive emotions. So then we go into, here's more grief. It can be really, sometimes it's more mellow, but it can also really narrow our viewpoint. And then, and sadness also. Anger, of course, is the topic we are talking about. Can be starting with irritation. There's something, not quite right. You're trying to fix something, it doesn't go quite right. It's irritating, but it belongs in the family of anger. And then it goes maybe into frustration, or really being pissed or rage, or then murderous rage, which we know all in the news. So it is, anger in itself is really a vast subject, and depending where you are as an individual, if you really suffer from anger, it's good to work with and find some of the roots of it so you can reduce the level of anger. And you can have, larger consciousness and calm. So here, those are the constricting, and here then the neutral emotion would be just being curious about things. So, being curious about anger, it's a different level than just being pissed or something. So curious is kind of curious neutral. What is the situation? What is happening with me? What is happening in the world? And then the expansive emotions, and these are just some of them, are just more located with the heart. So gratitude, love, or compassion, all of those are, or humor, joy, just all expansive, and our life force really comes much better into play. And of course, wonder when you just, wow, the world. So it's good to just remember, am I in a constrictive place? Or am I in a neutral place or expansive place? So if you are in a constrictive emotion, how do you get at least to a curious neutral place? How do you get there? So, this is the larger spectrum of the emotions. So one aspect, or a very important aspect to remember about anger. Anger is the top emotion. There are underlying emotions to anger. And the base one is fear. And with every anger, there is maybe even a split second of fear. So, examining your roots of your anger is also, where is the fear? And then it might also be some aspect of hurt, but fear is always there. Anger is not all bad, it's a part of our life force. So it has a function, and has a very important function. And that would be to say no to a certain situation, just block something, to create boundaries. So don't come closer, stop, or stop eating all the ice cream in the refrigerator, stop it, whatever this might be. So creating boundaries is obviously a very important function. And some people can't do that very well. Some people can't say no. And that in itself creates a building up of steam, of anger. And people can't say no. Well, many people cannot. So it's good to practice that in some ways. And it's more, more often women have problems saying no. So, let me get through my answer. Obviously anger is a big situation. I mean, with spousal fights, quite a lot wind up in a murder. So it's not something to really skim over it. And it's, obviously also not one of those so-called pretty emotions. It was very difficult to find generous volunteers to come to this session here. Because, it's not something where you kind of shine and, look pretty and, it's all hunky-dory. Well, you're getting into some of the nitty-gritty. And many people don't want to be exposed to that. So here we have 3 wonderful people who volunteered. Thank you. So, one of the major reasons of why there is so much anger right now in the world, in this country, is there's so much change happening in our world. Whether it is with a virus, with the health system, with our economy, with our politics, and especially politics. People can just really get off with all their steam into it, whether it has the basis in the family or something else in their, in their job. But politics seem to be a safe avenue to voice your anger. A lot of it we saw in the last election. Our previous president really knew how to fan that anger really quite well. So what happens when there is so much change happening in the world and in our country, in our community, especially with the lockdown? Change makes people, if I have to use this word, uncomfortable or fearful. That is the base of irritation. So then the kids come and play soccer in the living room. Well, just blow off. So, the trigger comes in very easily because that fear basis of stress is right there. And so to remember, all change, humans tend to be so-called uncomfortable or just fearful. How would it look when we have this change coming? It creates stress. Stress is a form of fear. And then anger is the top note. That, can blow up You know, you're driving down Route 20, there's 310 curves, can you imagine? A road maggot is in front of you, and first you just sort of get irritated, then cursors come, the next thing you start honking. So here we are. You know, that's really getting into an exaggeration here. But you know, just little things can really be very irritating very soon. Road rage. Of course, none of us here have ever road rage. So men and women often handle anger somewhat differently. You know, for men to be more vulnerable, to express maybe some insecurity or some fear or, you know, whatever, not so easy. But it's easy to express it in anger. So that's why men tend to have, you know, kind of an easy time with anger, whereas women, it's maybe not, you know, now things are changing in that department, women are more expressive. But as a rule, in the olden times, women turned to internalize it more, to cry, and it wouldn't be necessarily in an explosive situation, or just stuff it more easily. You know, many different forms of expression of anger in terms of controlling. It might be controlling somebody physically, locking them in a room or in a house or whatever, nailing them to the wall. You know, physical expression of that anger, which of course then is already really high 120, or sexual one, or psychological violence, you know, shaming them. And there is also a cycle of outburst of anger or violence. Violence is an expression of anger, of course. So first there's kind of attention building, and then comes a fight or acute battery of some sort, and then there is remorse, calm, loving kindness, and apologies, and then it builds up again. Those cycles come first kind of in longer time spans, and then they come more quickly. So all of that is, you know, an aspect to remember. You know, it's always good to get more feedback from other people, and so our wonderful audience here, maybe you can think of something that triggers you in your life, that gives you a part of, you know, where anger or irritation or whatever form shows up. So, who would like to go first?
I really appreciate people giving me feedback. I like being accountable, but recently I've noticed if somebody gives me feedback the exact same way, repeats it, and is just repeating it without acknowledging they previously giving me that feedback, or said a new thing, like give me a new twist on it, they're just kind of on repeat. I notice it's a medium size inside. I just get like, that's irritating that you haven't, you know, you're just kind of like telling me like you've told me the first time. So I've just noticed that recently.
So, Orly, as you're telling that, what do you notice? What do you notice in your body? What do you notice in your breath? What do you notice? You know, this is mindfulness. Physical signs of irritation and anger. What do you notice?
I feel I'm breathing more shallowly, like I'll breathe more fully in my stomach. If I'm feeling triggered, then I'm gonna breathe. I feel more breathing into my chest. I feel hotter in the face, and yeah, I feel like I'm less. It seems like there's less space for me to, it's easier for me to feel reactionary rather than responsive, which is usually where I'm coming from.
Totally excellent. Just, that mindfulness, about the breath and the aspect of reaction and response. That's all that, it's so important about can I respond? A response is more of something which you think about or what choices do I have? React is immediately boom. So that's, one of the key elements about, anger management. Great. How was that sharing that early?
Probably more comfortable than for most. I'm pretty comfortable talking about my feelings in public places, so here I am. But it's always, there's always that feeling of vulnerability. There's that awareness that there's vulnerability.
And vulnerability takes courage. So thank you. Oh, you seem to be quite ready.
I do. All right,
Suzanne,
I don't know
please.
about that. So you want me to think of a situation that made me angry?
Yeah, or something that, generally gives you a nice trigger.
Okay. Well, I had a situation with my brother a few months ago where we thought that my mother lives in a retirement home in Marin. Of course, I live here 2 hours away, and he lives right there 10 minutes away from her. And we thought there was going to be a power outage in the area, because that's what happens these days. And so I called him because I couldn't be there that weekend, and he lives right there. And so I called him and said, bro, there may be a power outage, and if so, Mom cannot be alone. She has Alzheimer's, and she's elderly, and she lives alone in an apartment, and she cannot be alone when the power goes out. And so he became quite defensive and said, the home has a generator. And what about you? And what about Pete? Why can't you be there? I said, Steve, I live 2 hours away. And so a lot of defensiveness, and no real answer and no commitment about him being there. And it made me really angry. Made me really, really angry.
So as you're talking, what do you notice?
I'm getting angry again.
Yeah,
my heart is racing.
Great. Yeah.
My heart is going faster.
Yeah.
I'm like bracing the chair.
Yes.
I'm stiffening up.
Yeah. Shoulders.
I'm constricting. Like you talked about constricting. I'm getting like a narrow vision. I'm angry thinking about it even.
Yeah. And so that's how the mind is so incredible, how it can trigger us.
It is.
Something that happened a couple of weeks ago. So this is excellent. Just, as you describe the detail of it all. So how is it right now? What happened here? Deep breath?
I just kind of let it go. I just kind of let it go just now. I mean, I can't do anything. All I can do is ask him.
Yeah. And of course, it's not here.
And it's not here right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then take a breath. And that's, of course, breath is always, the first aid. The breath, a deeper breath. Yeah. So breath stabilizes the emotions and expands them. So that's the, if we have no opportunity for any kind of time out, you have a fight in the car, you can't just go out. One thing of doing a time out is taking breath and shutting up, of course. Now, we have also a wonderful gentleman here, and is there? Tell us about a trigger, John.
Well, I'm pretty competitive, so I feel the adrenaline rush of anger most days.
Wow.
It's not a
And
rage. It's not a rage necessarily, but the constriction
Yeah.
I feel most days.
So give us a situation where your competitiveness shows up.
Today I was having a disagreement with a teammate at work. And it was great in the end because we got to a good spot, but in the beginning, middle of the conversation, you know, stomach starts to knot up, shoulders and hips start to grip. I'm holding my breath, you know, waiting for the next comment. So I think disagreements.
What happens to the jaw?
I don't know.
The jaw likes to clench, you know. I can't quite say what I want to say. A nice little curse. It's great that you shared this. So how, you know, when anger shows up, so first of all is the mindfulness, how is it in the body, how strong is it? So it gives you in a moment of reflection, so you can respond rather than react. So of course, one of the best things is the timeout. When we feel the steam is rising and it's getting hot, then it's good to have a timeout. Now in the car, you take your 10 breaths. You have a fight at home, then it's good to practice timeout. So timeout, it gives you some time to just think, cool down, because in the heat of the action, you know, you might say things you might have to mop up for a longer time. But if things are at a more level place, then you know, it's easier to work things out. So, and even though it sounds easy to do a timeout, it's not necessarily easy. And the part to say is, yes, I'm starting to feel angry. I need to take a time out. And so, and then take a time out. However, maybe we can practice this. Suzanne and maybe John have a
Brewing disagreement.
yes, a horrible disagreement, yes. So he needs to take a time out and
Okay. So,
and you have the conflict there.
okay, so we need to talk about this, okay? It's been going on way too long, and we need to talk about this.
What's there to talk about?
What do you mean, what's there to talk about? This is our lives. What just happened? We need to discuss what happened and how we're gonna deal with this.
This happens every day, and you want to talk about it every day.
How are we gonna get anywhere if we don't talk about it?
Where do you want to go?
I wanna come to a place where we can agree. Can we agree?
We just talked about this yesterday.
Yeah, but it keeps happening. It keeps happening. Why do you always,
I need to take a time out.
What do you mean?
I just need 20 minutes of space.
Now's the time to talk about it and you're gonna leave?
Can we talk about it in 20 minutes?
Why?
Because I'm getting pissed off. And if we continue to talk about it right now, it's not going to end up well.
Okay, so you're saying you're gonna take 20 minutes and then you're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about it?
Yes.
Okay, I can deal with that, 20 minutes.
Great.
All right.
Yeah, so it's a timeout is not necessarily like, oh, okay, it's good to practice, but it's not always easy, and it's the best thing to do. Time out. Okay, gives you 20 minutes. Or, you know, you might need a day, you might need a year, who knows? But, you know, a little time so the emotions calm down and you can actually then discuss the situation. So in a conflict, you can, we have various options, like we can either stuff the conflict, like you said, well, she doesn't really mean it, or she has her period, or, you know, it's not really so important. You know, just some things that would deny the conflict. That is stuffing it. And stuffing it really builds up steam after a while. So this is not an optimum way to go. So escalating it would be what?
Throwing fuel on the fire. You always want to keep thinking about this. This drives me crazy. You're totally crazy. Like, when are you ever going to like get that we're never going to kind of agree? Like, come on, just.
So a little bit of name calling, yes. And it seems to be always a judgment there in there. And anger does have a judgment right in there. And judgments, as we all know, closes the heart. So, yeah, so this was, you know, escalating it. And escalating really can go very fast within a second and can go into violence. So,
Well,
yeah.
especially if someone you really connect with, empathize, love, and you see them getting worked up, I find that heightens me as well and gets me elevated.
Elevated where?
Chest and throat.
Yeah, but also angry or fearful maybe. You know, that's a great point, because emotions are contagious, just like the virus. Emotions are contagious. So if your partner is getting anxious, you might move into anxiousness and, you know, whatever your own scenario is. But just to know that.
Especially if you think it's something that you did or didn't do, because then there's the fear.
The fear or a little guilt is hanging around. Yeah, okay. And that guilt might also be kind of an ancient guilt, like so many people have a sense of, you know, there's something wrong with me, I can't do anything right. You know, from childhood, you know, sort of like a diffuse kind of sense of that. There's nothing, you know, I can't get it quite right in life or something like that. And in our Western society, that is quite prevalent. Like, you know, there's something from an early age where you think, well, you know, there's something not quite right with me. And I talked to an Indian guru last year, and she said, you know, that's not really so much happening in India, for instance, but with the modern social media, it is starting to. And I thought that was very interesting. So that's just that kind of base feeling of, you know, something is not quite right. I don't know what it is, but, you know, that kind of awkward, nebulous feeling. Let's practice this a little more of escalating, stuffing, and directing, or the directing part. We still need to discuss. That is the most important part in working with anger. For Lee, for instance, when somebody keeps repeating, you know, the criticism again and again, you know, we saw how you can escalate it, but how directing it would be really saying something about what really bothers you in a form that can be heard. You know, it's always kind of the style. you have to think about what can be more easily heard rather than, something, I'll show you. So what would be directing to this person who keeps repeating? How would be a sentence?
I'm noticing that it seems to me that you're feeling triggered, and then I'm feeling triggered, and then I'm getting elevated, and so I want to make sure I'm tracking what's happening for you, but the way you're communicating to me right now isn't working. So for me, I need specific examples, or if you're going to repeat a specific piece of feedback, then tell me new insights that you've gained about how it is that you're going to be, what is it that you're needing from me? Because I just, right now, when you talk to me in that tone, I shut down. I don't have any, my forward thinking isn't happening. I just feel like I'm getting attacked.
Correct.
With repetitiveness.
That's great, that's directing it. So what would be directing to your brother? A form of direction.
Well, thinking about what I did do, which is get angry and raise my voice,
Yeah,
that escalated him.
right.
So thinking back on it, I would say, Steve, wow, I wouldn't raise my voice, I'm really sorry, doesn't sound like you're really able to commit. We need to have someone there for Mom. Do you have any ideas what we could do? Or, instead of kind of telling him, just kind of say, wow, Steve, I don't know, somebody's got to be there, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think also he's just kind of blocking you in some way. And not, he's just saying no.
Right.
And I think that also might be a thing to be addressed, when you just so say it blankety no, that's really hard to work with.
Oh, okay, so that would be a way I could direct it.
Yeah. Oh, the other part was also really good, but that I think the triggering no is just like, no options, no nothing.
Right, no options.
Yeah.
How do you work with that? Yeah.
All of that is great. And how about you?
I go back and forth because on the one hand, I like the competition and I'm okay with some competitive discussion because I think that it can result in a mutual understanding. I think wish I could do it with less tension, less constriction.
So what would you say to that person?
I think it's more what I say to myself,
Oh, okay.
which
That's
is
excellent. What do we say to ourselves?
well, what I say is, quit hunching your shoulder. The places where you grip, let it relax. Take a deep breath, and then try and move into, hey, this person disagrees with me. They might have something to say that I could learn from if I'm not so constricted into my own view.
Yeah, then you get into curious.
Yeah, right.
That's great. Move into a neutral curious. Oh, what is it actually here? Yeah.
But I think that I can't go there immediately. I have to relax and breathe. First of all, be aware of the constriction, and then relax and breathe it, and then all of a sudden it's like and it starts to become more expansive.
There's a lot of leeway here, and of course all of that, the more we practice it, the better off we are. So to come to a kind of a neutral place rather than constricted place. So you're such excellent students, I can't believe it.
I never thought of anger as such a constrictive emotion with blinders. Like when I'm in an angry place, I can't see anything else. And you're saying we need to open up.
Open up, so you have greater possibilities.
Yes, yes.
And,
I never thought of it like that.
sometimes we just really need to focus, something, the mother and a child. Well, there's a fire. You really have to focus and shut down only on one thing rather. And so
Uh-huh.
there is use for that. But not always.
Yeah,
Most of the time not.
most of the time not.
There's use for what, and most of what, I missed the last
But
part.
to be over-focused. Or it's
Oh,
just,
sometimes it's useful.
yeah, so sometimes it's useful. When the danger is really there.
Mhm. But most of the time, danger's not really there.
Well, it depends what, it depends, you're protecting a child. And from something, you need to focus really.
But there's a lot of paper tigers out there, as I've heard it called, which is, your emotional, and you can get triggered on an emotional level, and you're fighting emotional, tigers, paper tigers that, it's like you don't really have to have, like in order for me to set a boundary with my colleague or my friend, I don't necessarily need all of this going on
Right.
inside in order for me to be able to set better boundaries. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like the more I can track my own boundaries, and the sooner, for me, a lot of this has to do with, you're saying, it starts in irritation. Well, you can veer rage and frustration, if you deal with irritations as they're showing up, then I'm not very likely to go to frustration and to rage and to unmanageable amounts of emotions. And so for me, it has to stay with being current. And I appreciate the timeout, but like in a professional context, I'll say like my colleagues are certainly some people who trigger me. And I can't say like, I need a 15-minute timeout. And like, it's just, I can say,
You can't do that.
I can say I need to go to the bathroom, which is
Yeah,
always
right.
very...
I need to powder my nose,
yeah,
all right.
which I just thought I'd put it out there because I'll tell you, like, even in, maybe you can't, I've done plenty of teaching timeout stuff, so sometimes I can't say I need 15 or 20 minutes to go take a timeout, but I can say I just need a bathroom break, and maybe you should
fine.
start there, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that that's the end-all be-all, I'm just saying like,
That's
It's,
creativity,
helps a lot.
creativity, you have to, okay, how do I calm down? How do I come to a more, curious attitude or just neutral attitude? How can I do that? Of course, powder your nose is fine. When there is a disagreement, or when there is some steam and some anger in, let's say, with your partner, and the partner is starting to get really strong, it's important how you work out to listen or not to listen. Once you have come back from your timeout, if you are defensive and you're trying to, like the situation with your brother is defensive. When defensiveness shows up, what is your reaction?
often the same.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you get more irritated and angry. This person doesn't want to hear me, doesn't want to listen to what I have to say. Even though it is, of course, not easy to hear criticism, and you have to be kind of somewhat, protecting yourself in some way. But if you're just defensive, it tells the other person, this person is not, my partner is not interested in what I have to say, and, the anger rises. On the other hand, if you have finally learned the ability to just sit down and listen to this, often the partner, the other person's anger reduces at least 50%, if we want to talk about numbers here. It just really reduces the level because it's finally, this person heard me, and things can really get down to a more calm level, and you can maybe discuss the whole thing and how to resolve it. So, and it also can be an element of intimacy, it's just like that. Oh, my partner is actually listening to me. And even though this is an angry and a harsh emotion, my partner is with me in that sense. So there's a kind of closeness, or encircling the relationship. So it can create greater intimacy and then working things out and forgiveness or whatever needs to happen. So it's just to remember that defensiveness increases the tension, and being able to listen, which is harder, but it reduces the tension in the situation, in the conflict, and also creates greater intimacy. To remember that. It's good to have a little practice. So with maybe two people starting to say in a low voice, I'm angry with you, and then increasing the level of the loudness and the tension. And for the other person who's just listening, what happens? What happens in the body, what happens in the emotion, what happens in the mind, and so on. So out of this wonderful group here, who would be a volunteer? 2 volunteers, please. Okay, you face each other. So whoever wants to be the first one to start talking, the other person is just being mindful and noticing what happens.
You receiving?
Sure, I'll receive. You be the angry one.
I'm really angry with you. I'm really angry with you. I'm really angry with you. I am angry with you.
Why?
I'm so angry with you. Ugh.
Okay. What do you notice?
I got scared.
What?
Little bit scared,
Yeah,
especially
yes.
when she moved forward.
Forward.
I moved back.
Movement. Yes. So what else did you notice?
Just a tightening, just a uncomfortable.
What happened in the chest?
Just a tight, but like a jolt.
Yeah.
A jolt.
And what did you notice?
I don't usually demonstrate anger that way, so it's interesting, like tapping into that kind of unfeathered anger. I feel like I really identify with anger and with rage, but it doesn't show up that way very much. So I don't like it. It doesn't make me feel comfortable. Don't talk that way to people. But I see people who get it feels very fluid and easy for it. It seems like it comes very naturally to a lot of people. I feel like that seems like in a lot of ways the breakdown of a lot of relationships is like, all of a sudden at some point I feel like I don't have to protect you, my partner, from my anger. Like you can be like an involuntary dumping ground for anger. And I'm just like, that's part of why I've remained single most of my life, because I'm like, that dynamic, no thank you. But that, I feel like I've seen that energy quite a bit, so yeah, probably more comfortable for some than others.
So, and also, this was great, just kind of a neutral one, just in the subject matter wasn't really in there.
Right.
But, only when you moved, there is this aspect of personal space. And when a personal space, usually a personal space is maybe an arm's length away from the other person. In our society, in other society, Italian society, it's really much closer. But once that personal space is transgressed, there is a jolt what's happening, go away, kind of fear, step away. And this might, in this situation, the personal space was already transgressed as you moved ahead.
Yeah, I really felt that.
I mean, the personal space can be also from here to here when it's intense enough. So when personal space is transgressed, anger happens. It's just an automatic sign in us humans.
And then fear happens.
Fear happens, and then out of the fear,
Or
fight or flight or freeze, the whole thing. Fight or flight or freeze. You're such good actors. So, one really important element is when anyone has larger issues of anger and really wants to explore it, it is good to have an anger journal. And here is an example of an anger journal. So whenever even the slight stuff, the irritation and frustration shows up, it's good to have an anger journal and write it down. So after you have done maybe 20 or 30 of those, then you know where your triggers are and how you react and how you can more easily respond. And it's a great, great tool. And I can only recommend it. Do 20 or 30 of them, just sort of like being curious. How is it when you get irritated? How is it when you get irritated, a demolition crew comes for our taping? What happens for you? And here is an example. So the intensity of the anger would be, from 1 to 10, 0, maybe slight irritation, or something really big, And so you write that down. And then you write down the situation, what actually happened. What happened with your brother, this conversation on that situation. So you write that down. And then you write the physical signs. So the mindfulness, your breath, your posture, your tensity, all of those minute things as you some people just kind of lock with their eyes, all this, the more you have to practice them, finally you get the detail, like, oh, it's irritating. And then maybe you get a smell, oh, okay, I know this one, forget it. So then behavioral signs. Now what? Are you starting to slam things around? Are you throwing plates at the wall? For instance, that is, so intimidating to the partner that they think, this person is going to hit me next. So those are some of the extreme signs. Or punching a hole in the wall, of course, that also happens. But also like, pacing, horrible faces,
interrupting, talking faster, talking louder.
Yes,
That's
you're good. Yes. So, whatever your behavioral signs are. Then time out. Are you taking a time out? Are you powdering your nose and go to the bathroom or not? Or what is, or if not, just notice it and wonder why didn't you? What could you do the next time? And here, did you stuff it, escalate it, or direct it? And the directing is the challenge. Just kind of think, in your time out, how could you direct this so it can be heard and not just slam one over?
If I can say, one of the most important things in helping me learn how to direct it when I get triggered with somebody is I've been working on this trauma-informed integration project, and I think we're maybe quick to have empathy or have a trauma-informed lens when working with maybe young people or children. but not as much with our colleagues, with our leaders, and so for me, and again, mostly I don't get triggered by kids, like I'm like, yeah, they're being a kid, right, versus colleagues or leaders are much easier for me to get triggered at, and one of the pieces that's really helped me is just to have that trauma-informed lens, which is I don't know what somebody's been through, I don't know what kind of day they've had, I don't know what they're dealing with in their personal lives. I just taking that moment to sit in that, really I think most people are trying to do their best from wherever they're at. I mean, and they might be triggered and they might be looking sloppy from over here or whatever, but like if I can just take that moment to just see their humanness and see their vulnerability and all those kinds of pieces, I feel like it helps me move from that constrictive to that more neutral and expansive side of
you
gives me
opening
more
the view of the
options.
consciousness
yeah.
and put that event in that context. And that's, of course, a great skill to cultivate. A great skill to cultivate.
Sometimes they go, it's not personal, and then sometimes it is
It's
personal.
personal.
And that's good too. Like, let's get personal or whatever.
So then, the I statements is really an aspect of directing it. I'm feeling, whenever you make me feel guilty, I feel guilty or I'm something wrong with, please, don't make me feel guilty. Just say directly what you want, or, whatever it is. So with an I statements. And so physical activity, with anger, it just sort of steams us up. And the blood goes into the muscles, into the arms, into the legs. And lo and behold, you're just ready to pounce on something, throw the plate on the wall or the frying pan at somebody. Don't do it. Find some physical activity. So this might be taking a walk. Don't take the axe and chop wood. Forget that. But, go for a run, go eat fire. No, maybe not. But, do something that, work, or, get the vacuum cleaner out and clean the entire house. So those are some form of activities. And I would also like to ask you come closer, all three of you. Okay, stand up. So, let's just consider a part that steam has arisen. And so we have, who put this stuff in here? Who put these boxes? Are messing up our picture here? and so, let's see what this is. Hey! Here! Oh man! Oh, what is this? Oh, hell,
Sorry.
bells!
I'm sorry.
Hell's bells! So this is a physical activity, and boxes are always great and free. So it's just to discharge of that. So, ladies and gentlemen, wonderful audience and participants, and the beautiful flower who is witnessing this all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Wolfgang.
John and Arlie. Thank you.
Yee-hoo.